Hello everybody, this is Graeme, and today I'm going to be doing 4 quick reviews of these games here. Now these games are small box games that don't really warrant a full review, so you know what, I figured I'd do them in one of these compilation reviews. The first game I'm going to be looking at is one called Scurvy Dice, a game where each player is playing as a pirate captain to collect the most loot and be the first ship to reach the fabled Monkey Grove to claim their haul. Now this is kind of a family dice chucking game where you're going to be rolling lots of dice, and if you like that, this game is definitely going to be for you. So let's get it to the table and I'll show you how it's played. The goal of Scurvy Dice is to be the first player to reach the X spot on the scoring track, which is 20 points. It is played over a series of rounds, and at the end of each round you get points equal to the number of coins you have collected. Each player starts with their ship on the 0 space, and they will start with 10 dice. Roll the treasure dice, and the number is equal to 3 more than the number of players. So for this 3-player game, I'm going to be rolling 6 dice. Place all the dice showing coins on the Parrot Island, and the dice showing skull and crossbones on the Isla de la Muerte. Each player then rolls their 10 dice. They have one re-roll of as many dice as they want. Arrange the dice in groups by the side. The hull and sail side will be split into 2 groups. One is the how fast you can go, and the other is how many coins you can store. If you have more than one parrot at the end of your roll, it can be switched to any other side and added to that line. I'll explain each side of the dice as we go through the phases. Next we go into the cannon phase. From the fastest, that is the player with the most sails, they will allocate cannons to the other players. The receiving player will roll the cannon die just given to them and remove one of their dice that matches they just rolled die. The attacking player then sets aside the cannon dice they just gave out, and they are destroyed for this round. Next is the boarding phase, and again in fastest to slowest, you'll pick a ship you want to board, but a ship without crew cannot attempt to board. Both attacker and defender will roll their sail dice. If the attacker rolls more sails than the defender, they will board the ship. Otherwise, the defender escapes, and the next fastest ship can attempt to board someone else. Sail dice are returned to the original position after each attempt. If there is a successful boarding, you go into melee combat. Both sides roll their crew dice and add up their fight points. 0 for a ship, 1 for a sword, cannon is 2, and the parrot is worth 3. Whoever has the higher amount wins, and the loser loses one of their crew dice. If there is a tie, both sides lose a crew die. After resolving, the attacker can decide to go another round or withdraw and end the boarding action. If the defender has no crew left after a round, the attacker can steal any treasure up to the crew they have left in battle. If both sides have no crew left, the battle is over with no winner. Finally, the loot phase. The fastest ship gets to the island first to loot. When looting, take 1 treasure die for each crew you have on your ship, but you cannot take more than the number of hulls that you have. Then the next fastest ship gets to loot. If 2 players arrive at the same time, they can either do a melee battle where you fight to the death for the treasure. They could also instead parlay where one player allows the other player to loot first, or finally they can negotiate to split up the treasure however they want. If you have no crew left at the end of the loot phase, you will take all the Scurvy dice. If during any of these phases you have a parrot die, you can switch the parrot die to whatever phase you're going for. So for example, if you want to use your parrot in the cannon phase, turn it to your cannon side and have an extra cannon for that phase, but is now a cannon for the rest of this round. If there are any treasure dice left after the looting phase, there is a refit phase where all of your dice that were destroyed during the round are re-rolled, along with any dice not destroyed on your ship, and all players go back to the cannon phase with their treasure in their hold. If there are no treasure dice left on the island, then we go to scoring. For each coin you have in your hold, move your ship 1 space. For each Scurvy die you have, move back 1 space. If no player has reached the final spot on the map, re-roll all the treasure dice and start another round. Otherwise, the first player to get 20 points and reach the island is the winner. So I really like the pirate theme in this one. I thought they did a good job kind of with the theme in the game. For the components, you know what? I am a sucker for these cloth maps, so I appreciated these. The dice, you know what? They're decent quality and I've held up to the definite repeated rollings that these get. For the gameplay, I did find it kind of one note. You roll these dice a lot, and I think they may have been able to skip the whole boarding phase. First off, it only seems to matter when the other ship has loot, and catching them, of course, is another die roll. And if you do board them, you could lose your own crew in that battle. Now this was hardly ever done in the games I played, as it just didn't make too much sense. It was too high a risk to lose some of your valuable crew dice because you need them when you get to the last island. This led people just to try to get crew and the sails and hull, so they could be the first one to the island and take away as much loot as possible. And you could generally tell after the initial shipbuilding phase who was going to get there first. So why not board them and try and take out their crew? Because I may not be able to catch them, and do I really want to risk my ability to get any treasure at all during that turn by losing my crew dice? In a 4-player game, there is maybe a round per game where there was loot left over on that Monkey Grove to collect after the first batch, which again makes the whole boarding melee kind of less meaningful because you never really seem to do it because everybody's hold was empty. Now there is an advanced variant where each player can be a captain with unique ability, and I'm not sure whether those are fully balanced. So I'm going to give this one a 6 out of 10. The game is okay, but it's not one I'm going to keep on going back to. There's too many dice rolls for too little meaningful decisions. Now the next one is a weird one. It is ZombieLife Insurance. Now the company that publishes this has a goal of creating fun games with a dash of financial education. Now this one is about medical insurance and the zombie apocalypse. Now that sounds like a strange combination. Well, you're not wrong. But does that make it a good game? Let's get it to the table and see how it's played. The goal of ZombieLife Insurance is to accumulate the most money while trying to survive until a vaccine is developed, or getting insurance for a huge payout if you turn into a zombie. Arrange the investment, endowment insurance, medical insurance, critical illness insurance, and life insurance in their respective piles. Critical insurance and life are sorted with the highest payout on top. The action cards are split based on the player count. Pull out all the personal protective equipment cards and the infection cards and shuffle the rest of the action cards. Each player starts with 3 random action cards, 1 personal protection card, 3 coins, 3 health tokens on the health side, and a reference guide. Then insert the infection cards, shuffle again, and make a draw pile. The game is played over 6 rounds, and on a player's turn they will take one of the 2 actions from their reference card. Collect the money depending on the option you took, then you have to pay insurance maintenance. Any card that you have previously bought that has a maintenance cost, you have to pay that to the bank now. The only exception is the endowment card. When you pay the maintenance for this card, it goes onto the card itself, not back to the bank. If you took the first option, you can now do 2 actions: playing cards from your hand, buying insurance, or buying an investment card, and you can take any mix of these actions. If you buy an insurance card, pay the cost in the top left, and for each of your health tokens that is flipped over to the infected side, you have to pay an additional coin. You then end both player options by drawing a card. If you draw an infection card, flip over one of your health tokens. Then, any insurance cards you have previously bought that you now meet the requirements for, claim the money and discard those cards. If you have flipped over all 3 of your health tokens, you are now a zombie. Flip your reference card over, and on your turn you have different actions to perform. Finally, slot the infection card back into the deck wherever you want without letting the other player see. If you own a personal protection equipment card, you may use it when you draw an infection card to ignore it by paying the cost on the PPE card. After all players have taken a turn, the round has ended. The last player draws a card from the action deck and places it face up in the round indicator area. Each player with an investment card will then collect money based on the just drawn card. So for each investment card I have, I will collect this many coins. The first player marker is passed, and the next round starts. At the end of 6 rounds, the game ends. For each health token you still have face up, collect 5 coins. Then any player with endowment cards will gain 2 coins, and double the amount of coins from their endowment cards. And the player with the most coins is the winner. As you can see from the overview, the components are nothing great, but they're fine. The art is simplistic, but it's well done and definitely on the humorous side. I do like that the company is really pushing the education side of things as well, as there's an entire book in here. It's an extra book that you get on the whole gamification of the concepts in the game. They outline the real world and then how it was implemented in the game. I kind of like that, and if you are trying to teach, stuff about financial education or insurance, this is not a bad place to start. For the gameplay, it's pretty straightforward, but I really liked how tight the game is. It only lasts 6 rounds no matter what happens. There are some take-that cards and a fairly high amount of luck, but at 6 rounds, it wasn't too bad. Now, I'm not sure how balanced the game is. This is going to sound a lot in these reviews, as getting investments early seems to be like a very good strategy. The buying of the insurance card is an interesting decision as well, just like in real life. If you buy it early, it's cheaper to buy it, but then you have to pay those premiums. If you wait until you're bitten, it costs a little more to get insurance. I like kind of that real life parallel. If you wait to get insurance until you're injured, it's going to cost you more. Now, I'm not saying that this is a great game, but you know what? The game works and it's somewhat fun. Yes, the game can be unbalanced. Yes, there's a lot of randomness in the game. And yes, there are some take-that cards, which I'm not a big fan of. But with the shortness of the gameplay, I was okay with all these things. And if you want to teach someone about the importance of insurance without giving them a long, boring speech, this is not a bad option. So I'm going to give this one a 6.5 out of 10. It's entertaining and would probably work well in an education environment, but probably not something your gaming group will be coming back on a weekly basis. Next up is Lots Filled In. It's a roll and write game. In this game, you're competing against the other players to create a skyscraper that will define the city skyline. Each round, you're going to be drafting 2 dice to create a color shape to draw on your gamepad. You're racing to be the first to build complete levels, but not forgetting that large groups of the same color can also be worth a good amount of points at the end of the game. Let's get this one to the table. In Lots Filled In, players will be drafting dice to build towers on their boards. You'll score points for making complete levels, coloring in tool spaces, and for having the largest orthogonally connected area of each color, and the player with the most points will win at the end of the game. Each player starts with a sheet and a black pencil. All the colored pencils are in the middle of the table. Each player also receives a crew card. This is a one-time ability that will break one of the placement rules. The number of dice is equal to 2 times the players plus 1, so for this 2-player game, that would be 5 dice. The round starts by the start player rolling all the dice. If there's more than half the dice showing question marks, re-roll all the question marks. Then, starting with the first player, they will draft one of the dice. Once everyone has a die, go in reverse order, starting with the last player to draft the second die. Based on the 2 dice you've selected, you will choose which color shape you will draw. You must take the shape of one of the dice and the color from the other one. If you drafted a single question mark, you must use that as the shape die. You can choose any shape you want, but it must be the color of the other die. Draw your shape onto your board. It can be flipped or rotated. Now the block must touch another block orthogonally or must be on the foundation. Players then have the option to fill in a single purple block. You can only do this 5 times during the game, and if you do, you're going to fill in a square on the crane. These will be negative points at the end of the game. We then go to round scoring. If you complete a level, that is every horizontal block is filled in a row, you'll get points for each different color used in that row. Write the score on the crane. If you're the first person to fill in that particular row, fill in the small triangle on the crane for that row. When a player fills in a tool square in the color of that tool, they will mark it off in the tools section. If you color the square with a color that doesn't match the tool, you're going to receive no points. We then check to see if the game has ended. If a player cannot legally place a block during the round, the game has ended. If it has ended, return all the dice, the first player marker moves, and you start the next round. If the game has ended, check who has the largest orthogonally connected group for each color. That person will score the respective points. Then add up the points for your levels, your tools, and your large color groups. Then subtract the crane points for the purple squares that you used, and the person with the most points is the winner. The components for this one are decent. There are different buildings you can play on. There's 4 pads, each with a different building, but it really doesn't make a difference. It's just a little touch. And the tool placements are different on each of the buildings, so if you get a pad, all the tool placements are the same, but if you switch to a different pad, they're in different locations. Now, for the things I did like about the game. It's simple to explain and the turns are quick, and the drafting was a little interesting. I like the crew cards, which give you a unique ability, but I'm really not sure how balanced those are. There's one card that gives you 5 points for color majority instead of 3, versus a card that you get to copy a die someone else drafted one time during the game. That doesn't really feel balanced to me. There is some indirect player interaction while you're trying to be the first one to complete a row, but that's really about it for player interaction. You know, I'm not going to be hate drafting the dice because I'm always going to pick the die that works the best for me. I'm not going to be looking at saying, oh, I don't want you to have this die. For me, there's also that purple. You know, do I use a purple to complete that row? And I'm not sure whether it's worth it. Finishing it first means you get an extra point at the end of the game for filling that little triangle. And you get an extra point for having the additional color in the row. But the negatives for using those range from 1 to 3, so I'm really not sure whether they're needed or not. Now, I do have some complaints about the game. The first one is going to be a personal preference for roll and writes. One of the main enjoyments I get from this style of roll and write games are the combos. If I fill this in here, it gets me a star, which I can put here, which means I complete this row, which gives me another one of those. This one has nothing like that. You draft a die, and you fill in a shape. If, on the other hand, I really want a simple roll and write game, I want a little more decision or maybe push your luck aspect, like quicks, where you need to fill in numbers in a row, but you can never go back. You know, do you jump out ahead and try and close the row off, or take a slower approach? It's a simple decision, but one I enjoyed in quicks. This game has such a limited play space, I never felt I was really making any fun decisions. The game, though, overall, is just fine and a little bit boring. I think there will be some that enjoy this approach. It's heavier than some of the roll and writes, but easy enough that you're up and playing in a minute or so. But for me, it just didn't work. It's not what I'm looking for in a roll and write game, so I'm giving it a 5.5 out of 10. And the last one I'm going to be looking at is called Gluons. This is a card game about nuclear physics researchers experimenting with gluons and quarks. This game celebrates the life of Teresa Rodrigo and Enoro, here on the cover, a physicist who worked at CERN, participated in the discovery of the top quark. So I'm hoping this game is going to be good. Let's get at the table and see how it's played. In Gluons, the goal of the game is to complete the most successful interactions. A successful interaction is when you play a card where the quark tokens are in the same position as they are shown on your Gluon card. Each player takes a set of cards that have the same symbol on them. These are the Gluon cards, and they will have 2 different quark colors, green, red, and blue. For this 2-player game, place the quark color tokens in a triangle with 2 card lengths in between them. The spaces between the Gluons are called the interaction area, and there are 2 between each pair. Each interaction area will have an emitting quark and a receiving quark. Place the 1 and 2 activation tokens beside the game area. Now the game is played over a number of rounds and will end when one player's deck runs out. During a round, the players will go through 3 phases. The first is the planning phase. In turn order, players will take turns playing at least 1 and up to 3 Gluons from their hand, either face up or face down in the interaction areas where there already is not a card. At least one of the cards you play each round must be face up. After playing at least 1 card, you can choose to pass on your next turn, and after playing 3 cards, you must pass on your 4th turn. When you pass, you take the lowest activation number that's available. Only tokens that are face up are available to be taken. If a player takes your activation token, you must take the next lowest available token. Once a player passes, they cannot take any more turns during this round. And each time it's the first player's turn, all players with a face-up activation token flip it face down, and it can no longer be stolen. Once all the players have passed, then in activation token order, players will choose an activation of one of their Gluon cards per turn. If the Gluon card you choose is face down, flip it face up but keep the same orientation. Next, figure out if it's a valid interaction or not. A valid interaction will have the 2 quarks match the orientation of the card. That is, the emitting quark and the receiving quark match your card. If they do, take the card and keep it face up near you. It is worth a point at the end of the game. Then you swap the 2 quarks' positions. If you have an invalid interaction, that is, the quarks do not match your Gluon card, discard that card face down and keep the quarks in their positions. After all players have activated the cards, the first player token moves. Each player draws up to 2 cards from their hand without exceeding their 5-card hand limit, and if any player has no cards left on their deck, the game is over. For each successful interaction card you have at the end of the game, that is face-up card, you will score a point, and the player with the most points is the winner. Oh boy, this is not good. I thoroughly dislike this game. My biggest issue is the complete random ripple effect on whether you're actually going to be able to play in a round or not. Since only one of your cards is face up, you are completely guessing in what order they're going to trigger. If someone plays a face up card that looks like it's going to switch the quarks, you have no idea when it's going to go off or if it's going to go off at all. You have no idea whether those quarks are going to change or not. Now they play this up as bluffing, but for me it was just frustration. Every time I played this game, most of the players were either actively, visibly frustrated or just indifferent to the gameplay. To be shut out of a round just because you guessed wrong is not fun, and this can happen multiple times in a game. The cards you're drawing from your deck are random, so it ends up being just a best guess with the cards you currently have in your hand. Maybe they were trying to recreate the randomness of quarks in the gameplay? I don't know, it just didn't work for me. And that passing rule, it makes no sense. If multiple people passed around, then essentially the last person to pass will get the highest or the lowest numbered token, which means they get to pick first because of that whole weird passing thing. But passing also doesn't affect the turn order for the next round. The person who activates first is guaranteed to get a point in a round. All other players, good luck. You start the game with 5 cards in your hand, which leaves 7 in your draw pile, and you can draw up to 2 cards per round, which does mean the game is short, and I would say it's mercifully short, but it still feels too long to me. I just had no enjoyment from this game. Unfortunately, beyond the theme, which is kind of carried through the game, the components are really substandard. The art on the cards is non-existent. If the game wants to celebrate science, why not put famous scientists on the card to distinguish each set, because each player gets a set of cards. Heck, why not put Teresa on the back of your cards if you couldn't get multiple scientists? It This was such a big disappointment for me. I'm going to give this game a 3 out of 10. Gameplay-wise, I would say it's probably a 2, but I'm going to give it a little bump because of the theme, and I appreciate that they were trying to highlight the career of a Spanish scientist. But, I did not like this one. So that's it. That is 4 quick reviews of 4 small game boxes. Some of them were not bad, but unfortunately none of them stood out as a gem. Of course, I may be completely wrong and you love some of these. If so, definitely let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, that's it for now. Until next time, thanks for watching.